Alright, so this is the setup for our World War II game. Now, part of it is set, so a lot of the neutral powers, like Spain, Belgium, Netherlands, Austria, Yugoslavia, those all have set startups, but all the major powers like Germany, England, France, United States, Soviet Union, their setup is whatever you are able to build in the interwar period after World War I in our World War I game. Now, if you didn't play World War I, we'll have setups to go off of if you didn't have that, but yeah, so not much on the board at the moment, but remember our game starts in fall of 1927, so there'll be plenty of time to build up and the board to get a lot more filled in. The SS tokens. Currently, the only war at the moment is China is in a civil war yet again. We got the KMT forces versus the CCP. As you can see, CCP has basically a holding in the countryside at the moment. China hasn't fully gone into the warlord state. There are, large sections of China that are more or less operating independently, but they haven't gone full warlord status yet, as in they're pretty much officially broken off and more or less their own countries now. So KMT has Henan, Nanking, and the Manchuria states. CCP has Communist China, Sichuan, Hunan, and Zhejiang. One of the stipulations is the fighting has to stay in either KMT or CCP territory. If either side, whether it be KMT or CCP, go into a warlord state, it will activate that warlord or pre-warlord. It'll activate that, and it will join the opposing side. So if KMT, I'll go over here. So say KMT tries to go into Taiyuan to bypass the CCP forces and go for Communist China, that will activate this proto-warlord state, and it will join the CCP, or vice versa. So they have to stay in their little spheres. As I mentioned previous chapter, each country has their own unique tech tree or technology tree. Most of them you can't begin research until that power is at war. But this is Germany tech tree, the Soviets, Japan, England, Italy, and the U.S. These right here are technologies that can be researched while they're still at peace. Granted, there's still some prerequisites. This is a British technology, and it's the Spitfire. It can't start research until fall of 1936, but it can still start researching it regardless of whether it's at war or not. This for America, it's F4F Wildcat. Same thing, can start researching Fall of 36, whether it's at war or not. The M1 Garand, and Japanese naval codes. Now, what each of these do, the Spitfire, that just unlocks the modern wartime fighter, because pretty much everyone only has access to the pre-war / early war fighters. So they're basically just a little bit better than what the World War I fighters were doing. Same thing with the F4F Wildcat, that unlocks the World War II / modern fighter. The M1 Garand, what that does is allows the United States infantry to re-roll misses once. And the Japanese naval codes, what that does is that basically means the United States has cracked the Japanese naval codes, and Japanese forces attack and defend at a -1 when facing American forces. But like I said, this starts fall of 1927, so it's going to be a while before they can actually start doing that, because like I said, this fall of 36. Germany is still under the Weimar Republic. It is not gone Nazi yet. And that's about it. So, because we won't, because their first 3 or 4 turns, nothing really is going on, just everyone's just building up, with the exception of the Chinese Civil War. We'll probably just play to the next big event. It's fall 1927, so you history guys out there, what is the next big event that will affect the world? Put it in the comments if you know. France does have a requirement. France has to build X amount of ships. That's just to guard from players. Just because we start in 1927, that's just a guard from players just in their purchases doing nothing but buying ground units, to prevent France from just having this super army. Because if I was France in this, why would I waste money on ships? You know? So, and I just dump everything into ground forces and just have this massive army in, Lorraine and Picardy and Paris. So we put in that France has to spend money on ships, and they have to build a navy of a certain size. Germany still doesn't have control of the Rhineland. That's still a French mandate. Even though France doesn't have to garrison troops in there anymore, it's still a French mandate, so Germany will not be able to get the production from the Rhineland. Granted, it's one IPC, it's not anything overly critical, but so that's about it. So we'll come back at the next big historical event and see what happens from there. Alright, we're at the fall of 1929, beginning of fall 1929. I think for this we'll just go nation by nation. So we've done several turns since last chapter, so we'll just go nation by nation. So we'll start with Germany. Germany is still restricted to only being able to produce infantry and artillery class units, so it really hasn't been able to do much. The only thing that's really been able to add is motorized infantry, put down an airborne, put up some anti-air artillery. Concentrating most of its forces on the eastern side of Germany. Can't imagine what that would be for. But Germany's still pretty limited in what it can do at the moment. So move on to Russia. Russia has actually been concentrating mostly on a navy. It's built a small fleet in the Black Sea, and then a slightly larger fleet up in the Baltic Sea. And Russia's been concentrating most of its army in St. Petersburg. Put out, early warfighter and a tactical bomber, and then just kind of been spreading the rest of its forces out along the border, along with putting some stuff to garrison on the Chinese border. And then, well, while we're over here, let's talk about the CCP. CCP has lost half of its territory, but that's been kind of by design. It lost Zhejiang and Hunan, but the CCP's only really been fighting a delaying action in those two territories. It's going to make its primary stand here in Szechuan, where the bulk of its military is stationed. These orange chips mean mountain infantry, so CCP has a pretty solid core of mountain infantry, so CCP is going to make its stand here in Szechuan. Don't know if the KMT is going to bother trying to fight that, take that, because territory isn't worth anything, so KMT would probably lose a lot of very valuable mountain infantry taking a territory that isn't worth anything. But we'll see what they do. Japan is building its fleet. Japan has reached the limits on capital ships it can produce via the Washington Naval Treaty. It's got 2 fleet carriers and a battleship. So Japan can only build 3 capital ships, and it hasn't reached the point where it can break the Washington Naval Treaty, so that's it for capital ships, but it can still build cruisers and destroyers and all that other stuff. It's been building up its army and stationed the bulk of it in Korea. Put out its early war fighter. Can't build the Zero yet. Well, it's got to research it and it has to go to war. So, see, England. It's been continuing to build up its fleet because that's going to be its primary defensive weapon. So it's got 4 battleships. Let's see, 3 cruisers, half half a dozen destroyers, 2 escort carriers. It's got a tactical bomber that's probably going to put on this escort carrier, early warfighter. It's been slowly building up its forces in Africa, in Tanganyika and Egypt. And there's the British Mediterranean Fleet, British Pacific Fleet, and slowly building up some of its forces in India. Anzac put out its first unit, its first cruiser. Took Anzac a bit to put out a cruiser because Anzac was only making $3 IPCs a turn, and the payments for a cruiser is $344, so it can only move the cruiser along every other turn. France finally finished its fleet requirements. France has to put X amount of ships on the board and of certain type. It's a balancing act, so a French player doesn't just dump everything into a land army and make a massive army that Germany has no hope of defeating. So France finally finished its naval requirements, and since started building its army. It's put out 2 fighters so far. Started moving some forces to garrison the French Indochina. Let's see, Italy. It's, at least for the time being, finished its fleet construction and is now shifting gears over to its army and starting to send forces down to Africa to garrison its African colonies. United States, strongest economy on the board, has been building at a fever pitch. So you can see he's got quite a navy built up outside of DC. Got another navy in the Gulf. And here's the U.S. Pacific Fleet, and building up some Marines. New unit type. The United States has a unique unit, the PBY Catalina, that can do various things. It's a very efficient sub killer. The United States can put PBYs on combat air patrol to hunt subs. It has a greater range than regular fighters and has a higher hit rate. The other thing it can do is if it's involved in a naval battle and the United States loses fighters or tactical bombers, the United States has a chance to rescue the downed pilots, and then if it's successful, the United States' next purchase of a fighter or tactical bomber is only half price because they got the pilots back. And also the United States building up a military, or an army. It's kind of hard to see there, but there's infantry, 2 artillery, 2 light tanks, and 2 medium bombers sitting there. Then we kind of already went over the KMT. The KMT's pushed the CCP out of Zhejiang and Hunan. I don't know if KMT is going to continue pursuing the CCP into Sichuan or just let them have that, because CCP has very strong defenses there. That'd be costly for the KMT to take it. So, not quite sure what they're going to do yet. So the German SS unit tokens. and their counterparts, the Russian Guard units and Red Banner units. So, like I said in the beginning of this is the fall of 1929. So the big world event of fall 1929 is the stock market crashes in Wall Street and sends the entire globe into the Great Depression. So what that does for everybody, go over here to the production tracker, you'll see that virtually everyone's production is now one. Germany, due to the restrictions and the reparations that Germany is forced to pay through the Versailles Treaty, its production is zero. And coupled with the fact that France is still occupying the Rhineland, sort of. So until Hitler takes power in 1933, Germany's production is zero, and then Russia is one. CCP, China isn't affected by the Depression because China's in the middle of a civil war, so it's at wartime production. So CCP is at 2, but Japan and England are at 1. France is at 2 because it's getting a little bit of a bonus from taking production from the Rhineland. Italy wasn't as affected by the Great Depression as the rest of the nations were. So Italy's production was 7. It only dropped to 5 because historically Italy was able to weather the Great Depression better than the other nations. Partly because it was fascist, partly because Mussolini, and partly because of other factors. But the United States is also a 1 production. So Soviets, Japan, England, and the United States production drops to 1. France's drops to, and Germany drops to 0. So production will pretty much grind to a halt for the next several turns, just because Great Depression's going on. So that's why pretty much most of the nations were pretty much concentrating on building their fleets. When this game started, because the fleets are the most expensive. Ships are, with the exception of like destroyers, the ships are the most expensive thing on the board for the most part. So while everyone had money, everyone kind of just concentrated on building their fleets up, while they had the money to do so. So from now on, we'll probably see a lot more concentration on army units, because with the production of 1 for most nations, they're probably just going to be putting out infantry every 3 turns. But that's pretty much the update. So we'll come back at the next global event with an update then. See you then. Alright, we're at the beginning of the fall of 1930. Won't go into a lot of detail, be pretty quick because everyone's in the middle of the Depression, so everyone's production is either 0, 1, or 2, short of Italy and China, so not a lot is going on, but very briefly, The only real thing that went on is, various nations moving stuff around. England putting its tactical bomber on its second escort carrier, and Russia, or the Soviets, moving stuff towards their border, and France moving stuff around, finally garrisoned French Indochina and Syria, and then moving its stuff to the German/Belgian border. The only action is in China, where the Chinese Civil War is still going on. KMT has been making periodic attacks against the CCP in Sichuan, but they haven't been able to make any headway, and probably won't, because CCP has built up a pretty strong force of mountain infantry, and they are in mountains, so they're defending at a 5 on a D12, so it's pretty strong defense. KMT is attacking with mountain infantry of their own, so they don't suffer that -1 mountain penalty, but you're still attacking at a 2, and your opponent's defending at a 5, so it's, unless you have overwhelming numbers, it's really not something you're going to win. Japan continuing to move stuff to Korea, and that's about it. But the event for this turn, the political event for this turn, is the London Naval Treaty. Takes place. So that was a negotiation between England, the United States, and Japan, and there are other signatories to it, but those are the 3 that mattered. And it was an attempt to set down limits to submarines, destroyers, and cruisers. Their tonnage, how many each nation could have. The world's kind of still stuck on, a naval arms race being a primary cause for World War I, so they're still trying to not have that stigma happen again. So, once again, vigorous negotiations between me and my son, who is playing the Axis powers / Japan, and me, who is playing the Allied powers. We settled on the decisions for submarines is every nation can have a total of 3 or a total of 4. The destroyers had to pick either 7 American, 7 British, 5 Japan, or 9 American, 9 British, 7 Japan. And cruisers, 3 American, 2 English, 1 Japan, or 4 American, 3 England, 2 Japan. Japan pushed for each nation only being able to have 3 submarines. The United States and England didn't really contest that point all that much. England isn't going to be using submarines all that much. There's really only one convoy line it could potentially go for, and that's the Italian convoy line in the Mediterranean, so, 3 is more than enough for that. And so 3 or 4 works for England, doesn't really matter. For the United States, the only convoy line it can really go after is Japanese convoy lines. There's one here and one here. So they're not even going to be able to get to those until late war, and they're right next to each other. So once again, 3 or 4 doesn't really matter for the United States. It's more than enough. So The United States and England agreed to the Japanese player demand of only 3 subs per nation. For destroyers, Japan wanted the 775 ratio. America and England wanted the 997. And for cruisers, pretty much everyone was in unanimous agreement on the 432 ratio. United States and England, especially England, because it already has 3 cruisers on the board, so the 3-2-1 ratio would not have worked for England and would have had to give up a cruiser it spent a lot of money building. So England demanding the 432 ratio was non-negotiable. So the cruiser limit was agreed pretty much universally on the 432 ratio, so America can have 4, England 3, Japan 2. The destroyers went back and forth quite a bit. Japan wanted the 775 ratio because that would give Japan the decisive advantage in the Pacific in terms of destroyers, because that 7 for America would have to be split between the Atlantic and the Pacific, so you're talking 3 or 4 destroyers in the Pacific to Japan's 5. And for England, it's even more dire because it has to split that between the Channel, the Atlantic, the Mediterranean, and the Pacific. So you're talking maybe only 2 to 3 in each zone. So the United States and England pushed very hard for the 997 ratio, and Japan eventually agreed to the 997 ratio with the understanding that they would be able to get the 432 ratio with cruisers and a limit of only 3 submarines per nation. So after about a good hour of negotiating, to recap, the London Naval Treaty has been agreed and signed, and each nation has agreed to no more than 3 submarines. The destroyer ratio of 9 American, 9 British, and 7 Japanese, and the cruiser ratio of 4 American, 3 British, and 2 Japanese. Granted, at certain points, all the powers, England, United States, and Japan, will be able to break this agreement, and the Washington Naval Treaty as well. At a certain point, they'll be able to break that and toss it. But so that's pretty much it. So we'll get cracking on a couple more turns and come back with the next event. Alright, we're at the fall of 1931, and this will be a pretty short one because we're still in the Depression, so all the nations are barely producing anything. You know, they're getting 1 IPC a turn, so at best every 3rd turn they're putting out 1 infantry, so it'll be pretty short. So, because not too much is going on. You know, some nations put out some infantry and move some stuff around, but the main action is in China. Chinese Civil War still going on. Switch hands here. KMT is still trying to push the CCP out of Sichuan. This last attack went very poorly for the KMT. They lost 4 very precious mountain infantry and was only able to kill 1 of the CCP, mountain infantry. So it went very poorly for them. That hurt a lot. And that's about it for the turn. One thing I have been forgetting to mention this entire time is most countries, so the United States, England, France, Soviet Union, Anzac, they can't declare war until they've reached their full wartime production. And there's various ways that they can achieve that, based on Axis power actions, and then at a certain point they just get to roll dice for it. But other nations like Italy and Japan, because they're Axis powers, they can declare a war whenever they want. Granted, it's so I mean, they could theoretically declare war right out of the gate the first turn. Granted, that is very much unadvisable. It would be suicide because, well, just Japan, for instance. Round one, when it started, it had a fleet carrier and a battleship. And, 2 infantry and an artillery. That was it. Whereas the United States had 4 battleships, a fleet carrier, 3 cruisers, fighter, and various other things. So that would have been definite suicide for Japan. And Italy was not much better. It had a battleship and a cruiser. And its primary opponent, England, alone had 4 battleships, an escort carrier, 2 torpedo boat destroyers, 2 cruisers with another one in the shipyard. So that would have been suicide for Italy as well. So they obviously did not declare war. They're going to spend some time building up, especially for Italy, because when Italy starts the game as a production of 7, but when the Depression hits, it only drops down to a 5, whereas everyone else drops down to a 1. So Italy can definitely take advantage of the Depression to catch up a little bit in terms of numbers, because it has 5 times the production of anybody else. Germany is a little bit different. Germany cannot declare war on anybody until 1933, when Hitler takes power. Once Hitler takes power, then Germany will be allowed to declare war on people. Still not advisable for Germany to do that, even right out of the gate at 1933, because Germany, this whole time, has been restricted to just infantry and artillery class units. It cannot build any airplanes, any tanks, or any ships. Once Hitler takes power in 1933, that restriction goes away, and everything is unlocked for Germany, and Germany can build whatever it wants. And its production will go up to 10. It'll go up to 9, because they still don't have control of the Rhineland. But it'll go up to 9, which is a far cry from the 0 it is at the moment. So, while everyone else is still at, 1. So, it is smart for Germany to take advantage that once 1933 hits, Hitler takes power, everything unlocks, and it has the highest production on the board. It is very advisable for Germany to take advantage of that and spend those turns building up, while everyone else is still struggling through the Depression. So, the political event of this turn is Japan can invade Manchuria without causing a general war with China. And then also implementing the Manchukuo government, if it so chooses. Pros and cons to that. The con, Japan's missing out on some production, but the pro to that is it basically has a pro-axis power on the mainland, so Japan will start off with a pretty decent beachhead on China. But to do that, to be able to invade Manchuria without causing a general war with KMT or CCP, it has to wait till fall of 1931 to do it and to implement the Manchukuo government. Also, once Japan has taken all 4 Manchurian territories, it will trigger the warlords in China, and all these provinces will effectively break off and become independent states with their own militaries, significantly weakening KMT. So, we will get cracking on the next turn and see if Japan does indeed take this option. See you then. Alright, we are at the spring of 1933, and still in the Depression, so everyone is still at everyone who isn't at war and Italy is still at a production of 1 or 2. So it means the United States, England, and France really haven't done a whole lot, neither has Germany. So again, the only action that's going on is over here in Asia. KMT has made repeated assaults on the CCP in Szechuan and have not been able to break through. Those defenses up in these mountains are really strong, especially when all you have to combat it is infantry. And granted, KMT is going at them with mountain infantry, so it negates the penalty for attacking into a mountain region, but even still, when you're rolling at a 2 or less and your opponent's rolling at a 5 or less, that's tough odds to beat. Up here in Manchuria, you can see Japan has taken 3 of the 4 Manchurian territories. It set up the Manchukuo government. The Manchu government has been saving its money. It hasn't spent anything. And when Japan takes this last Manchurian territory, Western Manchuria, and KMT has done nothing to prevent that, that will trigger the warlords, so all these other Chinese territories will break off and form pretty much their own independent nations and countries. Really throw China into chaos. One thing I have pretty much forgotten to mention this entire time, another one of the benefits to Japan invading Manchuria the 1931 turn, is that technically means Japan is at war with somebody, and that means that their tech tree, their technology tree, is unlocked to start researching. Japan hasn't done any research because they're in the Depression and their production is 1 IPC a turn, and so Japan has been prioritizing that for units instead of technology. And a couple turns when Japan is able to break out of the Depression and its production goes back up to full production, then it'll probably start working on its technology. But the political event that happens this turn is Hitler takes power. As you can see, there's no longer the traditional German Iron Cross symbol. It has now been replaced with the swastika. And so we now have Nazi Germany. And as a consequence, that has brought Germany out of the Depression, and its production of 0 gets bumped up to 9. Now, we did change, in regards to Germany, we did change the rules slightly. Originally, it was said that Germany could not build, it was absolutely locked out of building anything but infantry and artillery. We have amended that. We're going to try this new rule of Germany can build other things. When the World War II scenario starts, opening up to where Germany can build anything it wants, but the consequence of that is when it comes to the Rhineland right here, they'll have to wait until the historical date of when they re-entered the Rhineland of 1936. And then on top of that, England and France both get a D12 to roll, and that will, whatever the value is, it will increase their production equal to whatever they roll. However, if Germany adheres to the Versailles Treaty and only builds infantry and artillery and adheres to the Versailles Treaty, Germany will be able to enter the Rhineland 2 years early. It'll be it'll be able to enter the Rhineland early. Germany will be able to enter the Rhineland next turn, and it will not cause a production increase in England and France. And also, when Germany moves into the Rhineland next turn, it'll bump Germany up to a full 10 and France down to 1. So that is a new rule change. We're going to test and see how it goes. So we'll see you with the next update. Alright, we're at the fall of 1933. And still in the Depression, so not a whole lot going on in Europe. Italy, the only thing that really happened is Italy reinforced North Africa a little bit with an infantry. England railed an infantry from Calcutta to Bombay. And that was about it. So the main action is once again here in Asia. KMT tried to attack the CCP in Sichuan again. Didn't get any hits. They lost 2 infantry themselves, so they retreated. And then Japan took the last Manchurian territory, so Manchukuo is now completely, quote-unquote, liberated, however you want to look at it. And the consequence of that is the warlords have risen up because the KMT never tried to do anything to fight it, and that angered the powerful in the various provinces. So you can see there's a lot more stuff in China now because all the warlords have broken off. And the Manchukuo, these guys who are basically Japanese puppets, they have started construction of a minor factory in Jehol. So once that's complete, the Manchukuos will be able to start producing units. So that'll be a pretty big threat to the rest of China. But because Germany has adhered to the Versailles Treaty for this entirety, Germany will be able to move into the Rhineland this turn and take it without causing any repercussions. England and France won't be able to roll a D12 to increase their production. They'll bump Germany up to its full 10 that it can get at this point in time and drop France down to 1 production. So that's about it. We'll come back in a couple turns with another update. Alright, now this is the fall of 1934, and now that Germany is free to build whatever it wants without relative repercussions, Germany has wasted no time and started building a battleship and a cruiser. And then the Manchukuo, they finished their minor factory, so they can start putting out units, and their first purchase was a Kuomintang army. Japanese relocated their air forces to their fleet carriers. And then the CCP voluntarily withdrew out of Sichuan to consolidate in the home country. Partly, well, mostly because of this increased threat from the north. Japan can, and by extension the Manchukuo can invade at any time. So the CCP is withdrawn to the whole country to consolidate their forces in case a threat materializes from the north. And the KMT afterwards moved into Sichuan and took it, but they have since refrained from attacking the CCP. Instead, they're building up their forces in the mountains. Once again, as the Japanese threat is ever increasing, so the Chinese factions have kind of made an unofficial ceasefire with each other, and in preparation for the inevitable Japanese invasion. And as you can see, the warlords have been triggered, so China is an absolute mess now. The big political event for this turn is Japan no longer has to abide by the Washington or London naval treaties, so it is free to build whatever it wants and however much it wants. That being said, Japan producing capital ships still will raise tension with the United States and bump its production up. There is still that. But considering Japan is still in the Depression and its production is still 1, highly doubt Japan's going to be building any ships. So that's the update so far, and we'll come back probably a couple turns down the road with next update. See you then. Alright, it is spring 1936. On the board, anyway, nothing much has happened. Like this, everyone's still in the Depression, but this is the last turn of that. After this, everyone's production will go up slightly. You know, they won't fully recover; they'll just start to recover. And unless you're Germany, then you just go to full production. Germany or Japan, then you just go to full production because you're fascist powers, and they tended to recover a lot more quickly than everyone else. So everyone is just still kind of building up, moving some stuff around. Italy's starting to build up its ground forces in the home country. Germany completed its battleship and its cruiser, and as you can see in East Germany, it's starting to build its air force. And that's about it. Quiet in China. KMT and CCP still honoring their unofficial, undeclared truce. Manchukuo is still building up. It's concentrating on putting out its elite Kuomintang army. There is a limit to those. How many? They can only have 4. And they have built 4, so they're going to have to start building quote-unquote regular units now. And that's about it. Probably from now on we're going to start doing an update every turn, because things are going to start ramping up and there's going to be something happening every turn, especially when the wars start kicking off. So, but the political event for this turn is the Washington and London naval treaties are now canceled. Everyone is free to build whatever now. There are no limits to anything anymore, because at this point in time, historically, everyone kind of recognized that world tension is ramping up alarmingly fast. Germany's rearming, stuff going on in China and Japan, and everyone's kind of realizing that a war is potentially on the horizon, and they're just kind of now ignoring the naval treaties. The other thing is Stalin's purges begin this turn. So what that means is every turn, the Soviet Union has to lose a unit, and it's decided by dice. They can't choose. But every single turn, Soviets have to lose a unit because of Stalin's purges. It's going to really suck for the Soviets, but and that ends at a certain point. It doesn't go for the entirety of the game, but so that's about it. So we will come back next turn with the fall of 1936. See you then. Alright, it is the fall of 1936, and still not much has happened because no one has any production to do much with, except for Germany and Italy. But Germany opted to save its money, didn't spend anything. And Italy just continuing to build up its army on the peninsula. The first round of Stalin's purges happened, and Russia, they rolled for an infantry, so Russia had to lose the Soviets had to lose an infantry. They decided to take it from the forces sitting in Leningrad. And that's about it. Everyone else just kind of moved some stuff around. Asian theater is still quiet. CCP or KMT haven't attacked each other. They're opting to just continue building their forces. So what is going on for fall of 1936 politically? The Spanish Civil War begins this turn. So the nationalist forces versus the Republican forces. So fascist versus communist. The Germans and the Italians can lease to the nationalists, and the Soviets can lease to the Republicans. Also, the Soviets can now lease money and or units to the CCP now, but that is only if Manchukuo agrees to it, because they'll have to go through rail lines to go through Manchukuo. They'll automatically get a yes from this warlord state. That's just an automatic yes. So it's the Manchukuo player, i.e. Japan, who will have to agree to that. So that is a discussion between my wife and my son. My wife being the Soviets, the communists, and my son being the fascists. The Germans will start to be able to start putting out their SS units. This first turn, it's nothing major. It's the first SS, which is just at this point in time just a militia, and it has to come out in Berlin. Hence why there's a militia there. See, that's about it. That was the last turn of the hard depression, so you can see everyone's production has bumped up, so the nations are starting to come out of the depression. In the case of Germany and Japan, they have fully recovered from the depression. England is about half recovered, and everyone else is still pretty near the bottom of the barrel. Technology has been unlocked for some nations to be able to research. Japan has been able to research technology ever since they invaded Manchuria, but with only one IPC production because of the depression, they just haven't had the money to do so. But now that Japan has come out of the depression, they're at full production, plus the 3 IPC bonus from American Oil. They now have the funds to start doing that, so we might see Japan start working on their technologies in the near future. This being fall 1936, England and the United States have some technologies that they can start researching even though they're at peace. The British, their technology that they can start researching is the Spitfire. It's basically just their wartime fighter. Once researched, will replace their England's early war fighter, which is much more powerful. The United States has a similar thing with the F4 Wildcat, to replace the American early war fighter, and the M1 Grand, which once researched will allow the United States to re-roll infantry misses once. The United States has another peacetime technology it can research even though it's at peace. It's the Japanese naval codes, but they can't start researching that until Japan has fully declared war on China and invaded them. But so the United States can't start working on this yet, but it can start working on the M1 Grand and the F4F Wildcat, and England can start working on the Spitfire. which these two will be very sorely needed because, especially with England, Germany can start building modern fighters right out of the gate. England is still relegated to early war fighters, so England definitely needs to get those Spitfires online sooner rather than later. Oh, and something a little different with lend-leasing to Spain. Germany, Italy, and the Soviet Union, when they leased units to Spain at the end of the Spanish Civil War, they will get those units back, whatever has survived. So that's a little different than what most games do, and it's just for the Spanish Civil War. Other leasing, it's regular. You lease the unit to them and to whatever power, and you lose it, and it just becomes that other power. But for Spain, whatever Germany and Italy and the Soviet Union leased to Spain at the end of the war, they'll get it back if it's still alive. So that's about it. So we will come back with another update next turn. Oh, I also forgot to mention that Japan and the Soviet Union can now border skirmish with each other in eastern Mongolia. So, Japan can move these forces into eastern Mongolia and try to take it. Russia can move in to contest it. And it's skirmishing rules, so only one roll of the dice. Can't go till attacker retreats or the defender is destroyed. It's only one roll of the dice, like previous games, because this is just skirmishing. And that's all. So we'll come back, the update for the next turn. Alright, we've got the spring of 1937, and we got quite a bit to talk about. A lot happened last round. So starting with Germany, it leased a destroyer to nationalist Spain, and then they used that destroyer to take their cruiser here in the Mediterranean, came out to the Atlantic to attack the Republican cruiser and destroyer, and at the same time took their forces from here and invaded Vasconia. Now this was twofold. They wanted to hit this Republican fleet here and at the very least sink a ship, because that way if they sunk a ship, it takes 3 ships to blockade a port. If they sunk a ship, they wouldn't be able to blockade this port, which means they'd be able to receive Lend-Lease through there. And they also moved on Vasconia as an insurance policy in case the sea battle went horrible for them. They'd still have a shot at winning the land battle here in Vasconia because France agreed to allow Germany to use its rail lines to Lend-Lease. So Nationalists did that two-pronged assault to basically guarantee that they'd be able to get Lend-Lease in some way. Fortunately, or unfortunately, depending on which side you're on, it went really well for the Nationalists and Franco, because the Nationalists, Spain, wiped out the Republican communist-controlled navy. They were wiped out themselves. It was mutual destruction, but that's not what really mattered. Their goal was to ensure that this port was open for Lend-Lease, and they accomplished that.
And the land battle went in nationalist favor as well. So the nationalists now have 2 avenues for Lend-Lease, very important for them. They failed their recruitment role. But then Republican Spain, that was controlled by Soviet Union, counterattacked and took Extremadura. So they traded one territory for the other, but with the Republican Navy gone, there's no way that they can stop German and Italian Lend-Lease. See, the Soviets, in their purge, they lost an artillery this time. They took it from the forces in Leningrad. It really hurt. Artillery is very important for the Soviets, especially if they invade Finland. They have to face all those elite Sicilian Jaegers. Let's see. The other side of the globe, Japan, knows there is a Japanese roundel in eastern Mongolia. In our version of World War II, the border skirmishing that can go on between Japan and Russia happens in eastern Mongolia. It doesn't happen here in Manchuria. Because this is more historically accurate. There is a big-ass fight between Japan and the Soviet Union over Mongolia, who is going to control, or at least who is going to have influence on the eastern part of Mongolia. So Japan moved in, and they took it without loss. So we're going to see if the Soviets next turn respond and hit the Japanese in eastern Mongolia. Like I said, it's border skirmishing, so it's just one roll of the dice. Manchukuo continuing to build up, put down another light tank. And also Japan, because one of the benefits of invading Manchuria is that now technically at the quote-unquote at war status, it can start going researching its technologies. Japan started research on a technology, the A6M0 fighter, started research on that. Which is a very good air superiority fighter. Once it gets that online, it will give Japan a decisive advantage in the air over its enemies. Let's see. The undeclared truce between the KMT and the CCP is over. KMT China attacked CCP China. CCP lost 1 mountain infantry. KMT lost 3 regular infantry, and the KMT opted to withdraw. England, just the European side of it, they used their $3 to put down another infantry in London. They used their $2 from the Far East Command, or as I call them, the Pack Brits, to purchase research dice, which England, there's one technology it can start researching while it's at peace. That's the Spitfire fighter. Start research on that. Rolled pretty good. I believe it rolled a 6, and they need 18 to unlock it. Japan didn't do so well. They rolled a 2. Also need 18. France, France, they only had $2, so they bought a militia, put it down in Normandy. Italy declared war on Abyssinia, invaded it and took it. It's a victory point for the Italians. And then they leased an infantry to nationalist Spain. The Soviets didn't lease anything to Republican. Oh no, I take that back. The Soviets did. They leased a militia to Republican Spain because that's all the Soviets could afford. They only had 2 IPCs, so they leased that militia to them because that's all they could afford. So the United States, it only had $2. So because it's 36, they can start working on their peacetime technologies. The United States only had $2, so it used it to start its research into the F4F Wildcat. So to replace its early warfighter and to have something that's somewhat on par in a match for the A6M0. Because that comes online, that'll be hitting at a 7, whereas right now the American early warfighter is only hitting at a 4, so America needs that F4F Wildcat, because that will put it roughly on par with the 0, or at least get it close. And that's about it. The first SS division came out, the German 1st SS. In this early stage is just a militia. It will eventually upgrade into something more extravagant, but Germany continuing to build its air force, put down another medium bomber. One of the things about the naval engagement between nationalists and Republican Spain here in the Atlantic, it's also the first naval engagement on the map, is our destroyers can make torpedo runs. So the player has a choice. It can make a more quote-unquote conventional attack with just its deck guns with a destroyer, which will hit at a 4 or less. Or the player can opt to do a torpedo run with his destroyers. It can only do this once per combat. And if they opt to do a torpedo run, the destroyer suddenly now has first strike, but it only hits at a 2 or less. So that's one of the unique things about our destroyers, is it has that ability, as well as the more traditional negating submarine special abilities. Naval combat, you can also opt to do what's called a night engagement, where you can wait till it's quote-unquote night to, and this is an attacker only thing, a defender can't do this, can launch a night attack. And what that does is it limits the amount of dice. You can only roll 2 rounds of dice, because night engagements were very fast and very savage. They didn't last very long because the cohesion of the fleets fell apart pretty fast, and both sides had to withdraw after usually less than an hour of combat. Otherwise, they risk firing on their own ships, because this is before GPS and IFF, and after about half an hour, 45 minutes of a night engagement, the ships are so intermingled and scattered that no one really knew who was who, and so they generally withdrew. Otherwise, they risk firing on their own ships. The other benefit is air assets, so fighters, tactical bombers, so on and so forth, can't take part in the naval engagement. So if you want to do a night engagement, no air forces, and it's only two rolls of the dice. So you can see what the possible advantages of that, or why an attacker might opt to do that instead of a daylight engagement where everything's on the table. And then there's another rule for naval engagement. It specifically has to do with fighters and tactical bombers, where you can basically hit a naval fleet with just planes and they won't get slaughtered. True fleet carrier engagement, but we'll hold off and explain that once we actually get to those large-scale naval battles. So I think that's it. So we'll come back with the next turn update. Alright, we're in the fall of 1937. And Spanish Civil War is still ongoing. The Nationalists retook Extremadura from the Republican Spain, and Republican Spain just played defense, didn't strike back anywhere. Germany and Italy both continuing to send units to help fight. Germany sent a light tank, Italians sent another infantry, Soviets sent an infantry to help. This will probably be a pretty quick one, there's not much happened. In Asia, Soviets attacked the Japanese Eastern Mongolia. Nobody hit anything. Soviets leased $1 to the CCP. And that's about it. United States finished its M1 Grand research, so now United States infantry can re-roll misses one time. And that's about it. Oh, Japan started construction on an escort carrier. That's about it. Germany continuing to work on its Air Force, put down a tactical bomber. Everyone else just kind of building up. Soviets and their purges, they lost a motorized infantry this turn. That really hurt because Russia doesn't have a lot of those. Right now, it can't really afford them, but that's purges for you. So we'll come back next turn and see what's going on. See you then. Alright, we're at the spring of 1938, and in Spain, the nationalist Spain is taking Valencia. And Germany continuing to send light tanks, and Italy continuing to send in infantry to support. The Soviets continuing to send infantry to support the Republican Spain. And that's about all that's gone on in Western Europe. Germany concentrating on Air Force with another tactical bomber. England putting out another transport and continuing to build its army. Continuing to work on its Spitfire. Soviets, purges continue to hurt. Soviets, they rolled another motorized for their purges, so Soviets have lost all of their motorized infantry to the purges. But the main action has been in Asia. As you can see, there is 2 new Randalls in China. That's because we'll start with the border war between Soviets and Japan. Soviets came into eastern Mongolia to attack the Japanese there and absolutely stomped them. There used to be 2 infantry and 2 artillery for Japan there. Now there is just 1 infantry. Japan was only able to get 1 hit on the Soviets in return. So Japan got absolutely stomped in eastern Mongolia by the Soviets. KMT, they pulled most of their forces out of Sichuan to consolidate in Hunan. And the CCP followed them, retook Sichuan from them. But the big news is Japan has fully declared war on China and invaded them. And they took Henan. Now this has raised global tensions. England and France, their production both went up by 1. The United States' production went up by 3. So this does raise global tensions, and particularly with the United States. In terms of technology, like I said, England continuing its Spitfire, the United States continuing its Wildcat, and Japan continuing its Zero research, A6M0. But because Japan has invaded China, that has allowed the United States to start researching another technology, the Japanese naval codes. The United States can only begin researching this once Japan has fully declared war on China. So now that they have done that, the United States can start trying to break the Japanese naval codes. And what that will do is give Japanese forces will attack and defend at a -1 when facing American troops, which will counteract like say the 0 that gives their fighter a +1, and the Japanese long lance torpedo, which gives their destroyers a +1, and so on and so forth. It will counteract a lot of that stuff, allowing the United States to fight Japan on equal footing. Everyone else, not so much, but Anzacs put down a transport, and Japan continuing to build its fleet, continue construction on its escort carrier, and put down 2 cruisers. So things are escalating and escalating fast. So won't be too long before this big show kicks off, and not just these minor wars in Africa and Asia. So we'll come back next turn with an update. See you then. At the fall of 1938, and starting with Spain, the Nationalists moved on Madrid and took it. Now all that's left of Republican Spain is Barcelona, so this will probably be the last turn of the Spanish Civil War. Global tensions increased a little bit more because Germany has moved into Austria and annexed it. So that's bumped German production up a little bit, and they picked up some free infantry. But it's also bumped British production up because increasing tensions. Once again, the main show has been in Asia, China specifically. Soviets have completely pushed the Japanese out of eastern Mongolia, so Soviets have definitively won that border conflict. Japan moved in and took Nanking, which prompted the United States to cut off its oil shipments to Japan, so that Japan lost its +3 IPC bonus there, but they gained it back by taking Nanking. So Japan just kind of broke even there. Because the Burma Road will open next turn, the KMT invaded Yunnan, which was a warlord province. They needed to invade it to open up their end of the Burma Road so they can start receiving Lend-Lease from the British through India. So, despite the fact that Japan is invading China, China is still fighting itself. Crazy times. KMT and the CCP have now definitively signed a official truce with each other, so they are now quasi-allies with each other. Sort of. But technology-wise, Japan finished its A6M0 technologies, so the Japanese will be able to start producing modern fighters, replacing their early war fighters, and the A6M0 gives Japanese fighters a +1. Modern fighters, the early war fighters don't get that +1. So that's big for Japan. Likewise, the British, they have completed their Spitfire, so now they will be able to produce modern fighters and replace their early war fighters. The Americans have completed their FOF Wildcats, so same thing with them. They'll be able to produce modern fighters and replace their early war fighters. And the United States also cracked the Japanese Naval Code, so the United States can listen to Japanese naval transmissions, and that will give them Japanese forces a -1 when facing American forces, so that kind of negates the A6M0 +1. But, so that's about it. You can see in China there's quite a bit more roundels. Anzac, they move forces up into their half of New Guinea to garrison that against the growing Japanese threat. And that's about it. Japan started construction on another cruiser, and the United States, now that it's not bound by the London or Washington naval treaties, started construction on another fleet carrier. And that's it. So Japan is now going to start working on its long lance torpedo technology, which will give the Japanese destroyers doing a torpedo run a +1. So they'll hit at a 3 instead of a 2. And that's it. So we'll come back next turn with an update. Again, the Axis powers are definitely moving towards war, so we're getting closer and closer to this thing starting. So we'll see you then. Alright, we're at the spring of 1939. And as you can see, Germany's annexed the Sudetenland, raising global tensions once again. But the Spanish Civil War is over, ended in a nationalist victory. And then England, now that can build Spitfires, is starting to replace the early war fighters with the more modern Spitfires. Germany is concentrating on building its submarine fleet, getting it out into the Atlantic to wreak havoc on Allied convoys. Same thing with the United States. Completed the F-4F Wildcat research, so now it is putting out modern fighters to replace the early war fighters. The Japanese fleet has started to move out and spread out in the Pacific, and Japan has taken all the lowland KMT territories. With the Burma Road open, the British can start leasing artillery to the KMT. And because it's taking these three territories as well as Manchuria and instigated the Manchukuo, Japan has used its call up the reserves ability, which basically it just gets 6 infantry, 3 artillery, and 2 light tanks to put anywhere it wants in Japanese held territory, so it put it all in China to counter the much more numerous Chinese forces. It's kind of hard to see, but there's 10 infantry right there. Japan completed its A6M0, so it's starting to put out Zero fighters. And that's about it. Japan started working on continuing to work on its long lance torpedoes. And that's about it. So we'll come back next turn with the next turn update. See you then. The fall of 1939. And Germany continuing to build up its submarine fleet. Moved its 2 submarines out to the Atlantic, and then put down a 4th one. Other than that, Germany is just continuing to build up. It's stacking the majority of its army on the Polish border, so it's telling that Germany is going to invade Poland probably sooner rather than later, given that it's 39. The leased units that Germany sent to Spain have returned. They landed in Western Germany. Same thing with Italy. The infantry units that Italy sent to Spain have returned. They dropped 2 of them off in Sardinia. The other 2 went to Turin. That's about it. The main action once again has been in Asia. As you can see, there's several more Japanese roundels on the board. the Japanese moved into Guangxi. It was a warlord state and took it, which flipped the other territory that belonged to this warlord, Hainan, to KMT. Then Manchukuo has entered the war, so the war has escalated. Manchukuo moved into Shaanxi and took it from that warlord state, flipping this warlord to KMT. So the war in Asia is escalating. Japan has annexed Siam. And then that's about it. So Japan got point of production, a militia, and a torpedo boat destroyer. The Siam's forces just to get integrated into Japan's. And then Japan continuing to build up its fleet. The Anzacs reinforced their half of New Guinea to guard against potential Japanese invasion somewhere down the road. Japan did really well on its tech role. It's still researching long-lance torpedoes. Needed 14 points for it, rolled a 10, so now they only need 4 more. Japan put out another cruiser. And that's about it. Germany finished annexing the rest of Czechoslovakia, so got 2 infantry and a fighter out of it, plus more production. Increased British production, but so it's can't imagine Germany taking much longer to invade somebody in Europe, judging by the majority of its army on the Polish border. I'm guessing Germany's first invasion is going to be Poland, but we'll see. So with that, we'll start the next round. It is spring 1940, and a lot has happened. Last turn, as you can see, there's a lot more roundels on the board that weren't there previously. So, German U-boat campaign has started. Did pretty significant damage to the British, and in response, British have implemented the convoy system, technology that they figured out in World War I that's carried forward. So they got some escort carriers with torpedo boat destroyers and convoy escort duty, as well as the tactical bombers, the British swordfish fighters out on combat air patrol hunting the subs. Same here in North Atlantic with that force right there and convoy escort duty. But the major action is, like I said last section, that it was looking like Germany was going to be invading Poland sooner rather than later. Well, that sooner happened. Germany and the Soviets, they signed the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, and then Germany invaded Western Poland, took its half of it, and then right on the heels, the Soviets invaded, took the eastern half. Because of that, the Soviets were able to put out some of their guards units to boost their ground units. for Germany, their SS divisions are starting to come out. You got the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th in Berlin right now. Because Germany invaded Poland, that has prompted England and France both to declare war on Germany. So the European War has officially begun. Over in the Asian theater, Japan didn't attack anyone this turn. The only action was from the Axis forces was Manchukuo. It took Peking. And KMT tried to attack the Japanese in Guangxi. They lost 2 units for only 1 Japanese, so they decided to withdraw because KMT, well, China in general just has to be very careful about losses. It cannot replace them, at least not quickly, and definitely not to the extent that Japan can. And so, until China gets some major allies on its side, i.e. the British and the Americans, China has to be very careful about what it loses. Because England, France, Germany, and the Soviets are all at war with one power or the other, they can start doing their technology research. British are started researching radar. The other one, they haven't started, but it's their next thing. It's Bletchley Park. They can't actually start doing this until the Germans have finished their Enigma tech. Once Germany's finished their Enigma tech, then the British, German Enigma tech gives German forces a +1 attack and defense. Once that's completed, then the British can start working on their Bletchley Park. And what that does is it basically negates the German Enigma +1 attack and defense. But to get it, the British have to sink 2 German submarines in the Atlantic. Soviets are working on their T-34, which will unlock medium tanks for the Russians. Germans are working on their Tiger tanks, and Japanese completed their Long Lance torpedo, so their destroyers get a +1 attack and defense if they make torpedo runs. So now they're working on night optics. So if they opt to do a night engagement in a naval battle, they'll have a +1 attack and defense on that. And that's about it. Yeah, that's about it. So we'll do the spring of 1940 and we'll come back. Alright, we're at the fall of 1940. And Germany is continuing to gobble up territory and generally seeing bad news for the Allies. So Battle of Atlantic is still going poorly for England. They lost 6 or 7 IPCs to submarines. And then, as you can see, Germany invaded Denmark and Norway, took the southern part of Denmark, known as Oslo. And
destroyed both the Denmark and Norwegian Navy. So as you can see, Germany took Oslo with an infantry, an airborne, and an artillery. And then they came down and took Denmark with 2 infantry and an artillery. Germany came out with its battleship and a destroyer to take on the Denmark Navy to secure its, or Norwegian Navy to secure its landing, and then its a cruiser in the Baltic Sea, which is over here, but is the same sea zone, took down the Denmark Navy. And then just rearranged a lot of its forces. As you can see, Germany now piled a bunch of its stuff on the western border of the Dutch, Belgium, and France. So showing a strong indication that France or at least Belgium and Netherlands are its next target. See, then Russia invaded Finland, took Vipery, but at horrendous cost. It was going up against a lot of Jaeger sissy units that defend out of 5. But because there's that fortification there, they get a +1, so they're defending at a 6. They all get first strike. So, Soviets managed to take down 2 sissy militia and two regular sissy Jaegers, but they lost almost like 10 units in return. They lost all but one of its ski troops, all of its infantry, and one of its light tanks. So they paid dearly for that one territory, and then the surviving sissy Jaegers, there's 3 of them, retreated. Wife controls the Soviets. I'm controlling, son was controlling Finland because they more or less turned into Axis. His goal wasn't to try to hold Vipery, just bloody the Soviets, inflict heavy casualties on them, and then retreat to preserve his strength to dissuade the Soviets from attempting any further attacks, which the Soviets have agreed to. They've agreed to ceasefire and end the war. All the Soviets really wanted was a buffer for Leningrad, and the Soviets are going to instead concentrate on the bigger fight approaching. Eventually Germany's going to attack the Soviets. They have to. Vast majority of their victory points are in Soviet territory, so if they want to win the game, they have to invade the Soviets. And likewise, vast majority of Soviet victory points are in Germany, so they're going to have to go to war with each other at some point. Soviets, they completed their research on the T-34, so the Russians will now be able to start putting out T-34. They're a basic medium armor, but they cost 5 IPCs to have 6, because T-34s were pretty cheap to make on purpose. Let's see, over in Asia, the CCP attacked the Manchukuo forces in Shaanxi, but had to withdraw. They suffered greater casualties, and this was more just to bleed the Manchukuo a little bit, not necessarily take it, because, like I said last time, CCP, the only
to IPC production and being cut off from Soviet help, they have to be very careful about what they lose and how much they lose, because they just can't replace it. See, Japan, once again, did not attack anybody, just concentrated on building its navy and its forces. Put down 3 destroyers and an infantry. Then building up its carrier groups in the Central Pacific, South Pacific, and Indian Ocean. Manchukuo, they invaded and took Taiyuan. So between Japan and Manchukuo, they now have all of the Chinese lowlands. The only thing left that the Chinese factions have left is the mountains in the western regions. So China, they need help fast. England's only offensive operations in the war right at the moment are navally. It took its portion of its Channel Fleet, came up here and attacked the British battleship, which was damaged from the Norwegian Navy, and a destroyer, and sunk both of them for only a damaged battleship in return. And then this escort carrier's Air Wing tried going after the German U-boats in the South Atlantic. Were unfortunately unable to get a hit. France, even though this was France's first turn that they could actually attack, Germany opted not to, deciding to just play defense, because, let's be honest, France isn't going to survive. Whenever Germany decides to attack, France dies. That's just pretty much the way it is. So I opted not to attack with France, because France has greater firepower on the defense. So I'm going to use France to kill as many Germans as I can before it goes down, and I can do that best on defense, not attack. And honestly, whatever attacks France makes, even if it succeeds, it's going to instantly lose again in the German counterattack. So France just played defense. Medium armor is now unlocked for everyone, so France put down 3 Char-Bs to try to counter the German armored assault that is coming. Let's see. And that's about it. Anzac continuing to build its navy. Once again, same thing. I'm probably gonna lose it, but the goal is to kill as many Japanese ships as I can to help out America. The Far East Command, or I like to call them the Pac Brits, they leased another artillery to KMT China, and then spent the rest of its money on tech dice. Italy, might have forgotten to say this last time, but Italy annexed Albania. They just spent this turn dropping more troops in Albania, probably for a future attack on either Greece or Yugoslavia, one of the two. Unfortunately, I can't do anything about that because those are neutral powers, and unfortunately, my British are taxed to the limit. I can't spare any forces anywhere. I know I did forget to mention this last time, but last time Italy started construction of a port in Tobruk. Once Italy goes to war and that port is finished, it'll get a bonus for Tobruk, and also it'll allow the Germany to send the Africa Corps to North Africa, a special ability that doesn't require a bunch of transports. Let's see, the United States completed its fleet carrier, put it down in the Pacific, because I need a carrier in the Pacific. Japan has 3 carriers, 2 fleet carriers, and an escort carrier. Strategic bombers are unlocked, so England put down 1, and the United States put down 1. And then the KMT made another attack at the Japanese in Guangxi. Japan lost a unit, KMT lost 3, so they withdrew. I don't know how many more attacks I can make like that with my Chinese forces, because I just cannot replace those kind of losses. But that is about it. So, war keeps escalating. I dropped some British infantry and artillery in Narvik, northern Norway, just to contest it, so Germany can't just take it for free. I'm going to lose that. I'm basically sacrificing those guys, but it's better than Germany just taking it for free, and maybe I'll kill 1 or 2 of those guys in return. So hopefully, who knows? So this turn, there's 2 events that's going on. There's the Tizard mission and there's the Destroyers for Bases. It's and the United States. Tizard mission is the Brits have to get this guy, Henry Tizard, to the United States. If they do that, they can offer the United States a deal. Let the Brits use the United States facilities and resources for technology. So what that'll do for England is the British will be able to buy tech dice for 1 IPC instead of 2. In exchange, the United States, their tech dice will cost 3 now instead of 2, because they're using some of their labs and resources to help the British out. But in return, the United States gets to pick 1 technology that it gets for free and instantly. So that could be a pretty sweet deal for the United States and for England. And then the other one, the Destroyers for Bases, is England can offer to give the United States its Jamaica and Bahamas islands in exchange for the United States has to give 2 of its destroyers to England. This one's a little bit more of a raw deal for the United States because these islands are kind of more or less worthless, and so but it has to sacrifice 2 fairly expensive destroyers for it. But the United States can afford to lose those 2 destroyers, especially when it's not at war and England desperately needs more ships. So it would be helping out England a lot. Doesn't really do much for the United States. And if for some reason, if England should fall, these being American will keep them out of German hands. Although England should be safe. I just destroyed 66% of the German Navy. The only thing it has left is a cruiser. I've got a lot more than that. So England should be safe. So with that, we will do fall 1940 and come back with spring of 1941. See you then. Alright, we got the spring of 1941, and as you can see, there are a lot more roundels on the board. And that is because France has fallen. But we'll start like we usually do, start on the left side and go right. So the British sent over Tizard to offer the Tizard deal and the basis for destroyer deal, and the United States accepted both. So the British get to use American facilities and resources for tech research, so now British tech dice only cost 1 APC, but because we're allowing the British to use, the United States to use, allowing the British to use some of their resources and labs, American tech dice cost 3 IPCs now, but America gets 1 free tech immediately, and the United States chose war bonds, so the United States gets that immediately, and that allows the United States to roll a d12 at the end of the turn. Whatever the value is, that's how much extra cash it gets. That only takes effects when they're at war, but and then the United States accepted the basis for destroyers, so the United States takes possession of the British Bahamas and British Jamaica. In exchange, the United States gave them 2 destroyers. The British are able to sink a German submarine down here, so that puts them halfway to unlocking Bletchley Park, which will negate the Enigma code, which has given all German units a +1 attack and defense, so that is sorely needed. It needs to sink 2 German subs to do that. And now Europe. Germany attacked 4 locations. It attacked Narvik in northern Norway, took it, defeated the British forces there. Then invaded the Netherlands, took it. Invaded Belgium, took it. Used its Blitzkrieg ability to then move on to Picardia, took it, and then blitzed into Paris and took it, forcing a French surrender, in which case the Germans then enacted the Vichy government. So Marseille becomes the Vichy capital. Germany takes possession of the rest of France, takes possession of Bordeaux, Normandy, and Lorraine. The surviving French army disbands. And then North Africa, Syria, and French Indochina become Vichy. Then Sub-Saharan Africa becomes Free French. The French Navy, the battleship gets downgraded to a cruiser, moved off to the Moroccan coast. The 2 destroyers become Free French, and then the rest of the French Navy gets moved to the Algerian coast, becomes the Vichy Navy. See. In response to that, the British, not wanting those French ships to fall into German hands, paid the 10 IPC penalty for attacking a neutral, and the British Navy Mediterranean Sea Fleet came over and destroyed the French ships. Then Italy has joined the war. Italy declared war on England, and the Italian Navy came over and attacked the British Navy. But it went poorly for the Italian Navy. The Italians lost a destroyer, and their battleship was damaged in return for only managing to damage the British battleship. The Italians also attacked the British in Tanganyika, and that was a complete disaster for the Italians. The Italians went in there with 2 infantry, 2 artillery, and they pulled at their fighter and tactical bomber down from Libya. And the Italians did manage to hit the 3 British infantry. There's 3 infantry, 2 artillery, and a mechanized infantry. But in return, Italy lost all of its artillery and all but 1 of its infantry, obliging the Italians to withdraw because it didn't want to risk its very valuable air force, which is going to be needed for the British forces in Egypt. The only attack that did go well for Italy is here in Greece. Italy took its forces that it had stationed in Albania and invaded Greece and were able to take it. That's about the only success Italy had. Russia moved in and annexed the Baltic states. That allows the Soviets to put out some more guards units. Wife got to do that, so I have to hit her up to decide which unit she wants to turn into guard units. And so in Asia, Japan has the ability to annex French Indochina, which they did. They moved in, and so Vietnam is now Japanese controlled, and the French transport and the French infantry jumped ship and joined Japan. And then because the Netherlands had been conquered by Germany, the Dutch possessions in the Pacific become British controlled and administered. So this production will now be going to England. Just use the NATO symbols to designate that that's producing income and who controls it. And the Dutch forces just get folded into British. The United States has passed the threshold, so now it can start doing a more active role in the Pacific. So the United States moved its Pacific Fleet out to Hawaii and is sending Marines to reinforce, to garrison Port Island, so it landed some Marines at Midway. These Marines are going to Hawaii. And it pulled, it completed its fleet carrier, but then it pulled the battleship, cruiser, and 2 destroyers that were originally sitting here in the Gulf, and it moved it to reinforce the Pacific. Because I'm not expecting a lot of these ships here to be alive once Japan attacks. I'm expecting most of those to be sunk. In Asia, Japan did some reorganizing of its forces. The CCP attacked the Manchukuo forces in Shaanxi again. They got no hits for one loss of their own. Or is it two? There's one or two losses. But, so they withdrew for the same reasons as before. You should actually be there. KMT came out and attacked the Japanese in Guangxi again, and this was an absolute disaster for the KMT. They got 2 hits on Japan, which Japan put down a hospital, so they were able to recover that. In return, they lost 4 or 5 infantry in return that they did not get back, so that was an absolute disaster for the KMT. And they reduced their numbers so much that the KMT is pretty much decisively going to be on the defensive for the next several turns. It can't afford another loss like that. And then that's pretty much it. Japan focusing on ground forces, put down 2 SNLF. That's the Special Naval Landing Force, basically the Japanese version of Marines. Another destroyer. Yeah, that's about it. England has unlocked the SAS, the Special Air Service, so that is the British Special Forces. They have their own special abilities. They're airborne unit. They have first strike and target selection, and they have a +1 attack and defense, I believe. So, yeah, a lot changed in one turn. There is an event that happens this turn. The United States has the option of annexing Greenland, which it historically it didn't annex Greenland per se, but it did. President Roosevelt did announce that Greenland would base. So any movement that the Axis powers did against Greenland would be considered an act of war against the United States. And then the United States, we did build bases in Greenland, mostly air bases, and we flew a lot of anti-submarine missions out of Greenland. So the United States will be able to do that this turn. If it takes an infantry, it goes up, lands it in Greenland, it can annex it, and from there it can start building air bases. And then from there, they can use the PBY Catalinas to do anti-submarine interdiction missions. Which would be nice, because if the United States does that, from Greenland, it'll be able to cover these 2 sea zones with the Catalinas from Greenland, and that will free up this British tactical bomber and this escort carrier and the 2 torpedo boat destroyers to do other things. So that's about it. So we'll do spring of 1941, and we'll come back with another update. And this is the
we're at the fall of 1941, and United States start construction on a Iowa class battleship, a fleet carrier, and an escort carrier. And then also annex Greenland. And that's about all the United States did, East Coast wise anyways. There's 2 destroyers that the United States gifted to England. Let's see, Germany, its only action was it did a huge bombing raid on London. 2 fighters, 2 tactical bombers, and 2 medium bombers, targeting the London factory and the London shipyard here. Because England had a damaged battleship in the sea zone, so in order to repair it, it'd have to repair the shipyard first. And then actually between the damage that Germany did to the London factory, the damage it did to the shipyard, and the losses on these convoy lines, and then repairing this battleship, it actually ate up the entirety of the British production. So England wasn't able to produce a single thing this turn. And then Germany's only other attack was it took Yugoslavia. The British retaliation it was mostly successful. The British were able to sink the second submarine down here, which completes its Bletchley Park technology, which will neutralize the Enigma code, which was given German units a +1, and also unlocks ultra intercepts, so England can start researching that. The other naval action is the British Mediterranean Fleet came up here, attacked the Italian fleet, and completely destroyed it. These Italian subs attacked this convoy line, did 4 points of damage on that. The British ground offensive started off poorly. England attacked the Italians in Italian Somaliland, and it was a complete disaster. They went in there with a mechanized infantry and 2 artillery against this 1 infantry, and didn't hit anything. The Italians hit both times, forcing the British to withdraw. But the British assault in Libya went much better. British came out of Egypt, attacked the Italians, wiped them out, and took Libya. And then the British bombed the West German factory, doing 5 points of damage. See, in terms of Europe, the European theater, that's about it. Germany, just building up ground units, placing them for all their ground units they're putting in the easternmost factory. So Germany obviously gearing up for attack on the Soviets in the near future. Italians pulling the majority of their forces out of Greece into Yugoslavia, probably to support Germany in an attack on the Soviet Union. Soviets likewise building up their forces on the border, because at some point those two have to go to war with each other, because all their victory points are in each other's territories. In the east, in Asia, the only action was here in Guangxi when KMT came out and attacked, and pretty much was a draw. Both sides lost 2. units. And then Japan spends this turn concentrating on its army, putting out a bunch of infantry, artillery, and mechanized units. The United States consolidated its fleet off the west coast, landed a marine in Hawaii to prepare for Japan's eventual attack. Japan has to attack the United States. Well, maybe not necessarily the United States, but Japan has to attack either United States or England at some point, sooner rather than later. The Japanese, they finished their night optic technology, so if they do a night attack with their navy, they'll have a +1 on their attack and defense. England finished its long-range aircraft, so British air power will have a +2 movement. And that's about it. So we'll get going on the next turn and see what happens. Alright, we are now at the spring of 1942, and this war just turned into a world war. A lot of things kicked off this last turn. So, start from left to right. See the context. Japan declared war on the United States and England and attacked a whole bunch of places. So America is now in the war, and they immediately came across and landed in North Africa. They've started construction of an air base in Greenland and moved its 2 Catalinas to Greenland. Now that they're in the war, once that air base is completed, they can send these Catalinas out to do basically hunt submarines and lock these 2 territories down and close that mid-Atlantic gap. And the first American bombers have arrived in England to help with the strategic bombing campaign in Germany that England's been conducting on its own so far. Last turn they did, looks like 3 damage to the major factory in West Germany. The British are besieging the German Afrika Korps in Tobruk. That's what's left of it. Once the Axis are cleared from North Africa, and the Allies can start entertaining ideas of landing in southern Europe somewhere or going straight for Italy itself. That'll be something that the Axis player is going to have to watch out for. Germany has aligned Iraq, something it can do once it lands the Afrika Korps. And then, as you can see, the British took some of its Indian forces and invaded Iran. It's something it can do in conjunction with the Soviet Union. The British take Iran, the Soviets take Tehran. Once that's accomplished, the United States confront the bill to build a naval base in Iran. And once that's complete, it will open a southern supply route to Russia, and Soviets will get a +4 IPC bonus. And then the reason why that can happen is because Germany has invaded the Soviet Union.
is betrayed the Soviets, renounced the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, and has invaded the Soviet Union. They invaded Estonia. Actually, those planes have to go back somewhere. They can't be there because Germany just took Estonia, and they took East Poland. They tried to take Lubelski, but had to withdraw. Couldn't take it. The Soviets, in return, the first turn that Germany attacked the Soviets, can only make one counterattack. They attempted to do that in East Poland. Did not go so well for them because the Soviets, for the next 3 land attacks, are still under the Stalin Purge effects. So what that does is all Soviet units that take part in an attack, they have to roll a d6, 1 to 3. They receive their orders, they get to shoot. 4 to 6, they do not receive their orders and don't shoot. And any tactical bombers involved, if they get a hit, they have to roll a d6. 1 to 3, it hits an enemy. 4 to 6, it's a friendly fire, hits their own. To simulate the incompetence and utter chaos the Soviets had to deal with the first several months of the war, due to the Soviet officer and NCO corps being completely gutted by Stalin's purges, and very green new officers and NCOs being pressed into positions that they weren't qualified for. Also, because of that, because Germany invading the Soviet Union, Germany also aligned Finland, Romania, and Bulgaria. And Finland lost an invasion, retook Viipuri, and took this extreme northern Soviet province. And then, like I said, Japan declared war on the United States and England and attacked all over the place. Japan invaded Hong Kong, took it. Malay took that. Sarawak, Celebes, and the Molucca Islands. Took all those, and the U.S. Philippines. And then the Japanese Navy attacked and destroyed the British Navy in India. Attacked and destroyed the American fleet in Hawaii. And they attacked the Anzac fleet off of Sydney, but were unsuccessful. They whittled it down to 1 cruiser, but Japan had to withdraw its own fleet as well. The naval battle off of Sydney is the only battle that Japan lost that turn. They won everything else. So everyone is now involved. All powers are in the war now. And it is now truly a world war. But that's pretty much what America's entry in World War II did. Because prior to American entry, World War II was just was 2 separate wars, two separate theater wars: the European War and the war in China. America's
entry into the war linked those two theaters and turned it into a truly world war. So, like I said, it's spring 42, so it's still early. So, with all the major powers involved, we'll see what happens now. Germany has completed its research on the Type 9 advanced submarine, so they'll probably start rolling those out, which is bad news for the Allies in the Atlantic, because they have not completed the advanced submarine warfare yet. They do have, England does have naval radar, so that will help a little bit. And as soon as America gets this Greenland air base online and be able to patrol this North Atlantic route with Catalinas, that will help out considerably. England finished research on long-range aircraft, so now British bombers can make it to Berlin and back. So that will be pretty crucial. British can bomb Berlin while the United States hits, East Germany or Munich or something. But so we'll do the spring 42 turn and we will come back. Alright, we're at the fall of 1942 turn. And pretty decent amount of stuff happened this turn. The United States completed the air base in Greenland, so now the United States will be able to use its Catalinas to take over a convoy escort on this North Atlantic line. That'll free up the British from having to guard this North Atlantic line, so that'll give the British an escort carrier that it can free up and send somewhere else. The Allied strategic bombing campaign has started in earnest. As you can see, there's 2 American B-17s and 2 British. Oh boy, I'm brain dumping what model that is. Anyways, British, with their long-range aircraft, they can now get all the way to Berlin and back with escort. United States not quite there, but it bombed East Germany, the 2 closest major factories to the Soviets. Try to help out the Soviets as much as they can. The Eastern Theater, not very good news for the Soviets. The Germans have taken territory north and south of Kiev, so Kiev is in danger of being surrounded. Germans have also pushed the Soviets completely out of Poland, pushed them out of Lubelski, and they've been pushed out of 2 of the 3 Baltic states. The only state that Russia has left is Estonia. Soviets are just kind of desperately trying to stitch together a front line that can halt the German advance, because it's been fairly steady. There is some good news for the Soviets. The Soviets launched a naval campaign, destroyed the German destroyer in the Black Sea, and then destroyed the remnants of the German Navy in the Baltic Sea, and then put down 2 submarines on this German line to go after that Swedish iron. Try to hamper its trade a little bit. Additional really good news for the Allies is the Allies have pushed the Axis forces completely out of Africa. There's still some Vichy French territory, but there's no
units or forces on them, so they just gotta march in and change the flags. But with allies in complete control of Africa and complete control of the Mediterranean, Italy has 2 submarines here on this convoy line, and then a mini sub, but that's it in terms of Axis Navy. As you can see, the British naval presence, the Allies have complete control of the Mediterranean. So with the Allied control of Africa and the Mediterranean, that has now opened the door for an invasion of Southern Europe somewhere, whether it be Italy or Southern France or Yugoslavia. Where doesn't really matter. The key point is the door to returning to continental Europe is open, and Germany and Italy is going to have to respect that, whether that means pulling some forces back from the Soviet front or redirecting reinforcements that were supposed to go to the Soviet front south to cover the very thinly defended southern coastline of Europe. And on top of that, both the British and the Americans have completed their joint command technology, which means British and American forces can attack together. Now that's pretty big. I mean, they could always defend together, but now they can attack together. If England uses American forces in an attack, obviously when it comes to the American turn, they can't be used because they've already taken a combat action for the round. But being able to attack together is a pretty big advantage. And then in the Pacific, a lot of naval combat going on. After destroying the American fleet at Hawaii, the Japanese fleet tried to make a retreat back to friendlier waters, but the American fleet from the west coast sailed out, attacked, and between the carrier strike planes and then a night attack by American surface ships, they were able to completely wipe out the Japanese fleet. America lost a destroyer, a damaged battleship, and a fighter lost its fighter, but because America had the Catalina out on search and rescue, they're able to recover the pilots. So when America goes to buy that replacement fighter, it's at half cost instead of the full 10. They only have to pay 5 because they don't have to replace the pilots. And then the other naval action was down here in the Coral Sea. The Anzac Navy launched a night attack against the Japanese carrier group here. In terms of tonnage, the Anzacs came out on top. They sunk a Japanese cruiser for the loss of a destroyer on their end. So it was, in terms of tonnage, as an Anzac victory, but more importantly, strategically, that carrier, it's a light carrier, an escort carrier, but that carrier is more than likely going to have to withdraw because it's all by itself. It has no destroyer or cruiser escort, so it's probably going to have to withdraw. Otherwise, Anzac is in a very good position to sink it. So that's the more important goal is getting Japan to withdraw from the Coral Sea area. They'll secure Australia and push the Japanese perimeter back a little bit. Japan did have some successes. It's continuing to gobble up the Money Islands. It took Sumatra, Borneo, and Dutch New Guinea. The Anzacs tried to attack the Japanese-occupied New Guinea, or Dutch New Guinea. They lost an infantry for no Japanese losses of their own, so that was a failure. Oh, and that Japanese fleet, the sole survivor was the fighter group. It retreated to Iwo Jima. And on the mainland, Japan and Manchukuo played defensively, did not attack anything. Japan's priority right now is getting and securing Indonesia. It's pretty much taken all it needs / wants of the mainland, so now it's just going to go into defensive holding. The United States opted to do the Shermans for Monty. What that is that the United States can buy 2 medium tanks on England's behalf, and then they are transported to Africa. It has to be a port, so it'd either be Cairo, since Italy built a naval base in Tobruk, and since England has since captured that, those Shermans were dropped off in Tobruk. And then England is getting ready to invade Iraq, squeeze out that German-aligned or Axis-aligned government, and then from there they'll be able to use that as a launching platform to liberate Syria from the Vichy French government. And that's about it. Still waiting on Russia to take its half of Iran, so then the United States can build a naval base and open up a Lend-Lease route to Russia. Give Russia a +4 IPC bonus. That's what these Siberian forces are going to be earmarked for. I'm going to move them down to Iran to accomplish that. And that's about it. So we'll come back at the end of the next round. Alright, we're at the spring of 1943, and quite a bit happened last turn, and something big is definitely on the horizon. So start left to right. British sunk another German submarine in the South Atlantic line. The Americans completed the air base in Greenland, so allowed them to send out their Catalinas to start hunting subs in this North Atlantic line. They failed to get any kills that turn, but it's becoming increasingly dangerous for German subs to be in the Atlantic. Over here on the East Coast, the United States is definitely building up a second invasion force to go somewhere. Something that the British are also doing, obviously building up a second invasion force. The Allies have managed to completely drive the Axis powers from Africa completely. The British took Talon, Somaliland, and Eritrea, and along with Kufra in Libya. The Americans have taken the Vichy French North African territories that matter. These two bottom ones kind of meaningless. So the Allies have completely secured the African continent, and then the Brits sunk a Italian sub in the Mediterranean convoy line, and then they took Sicily. And then the British moved their fleet to off the western coast of Italy, so a invasion of Italy by the British and probably the Americans is coming sooner rather than later. The Allied bombing campaign continues apace, bombing Berlin and Eastern Germany, continuing to hit the two closest major factories to the Soviets to try to relieve some pressure on them. Because I think if the Allies don't open up a second front on the Germans soon, the Soviets are in major trouble. As you can see, the Germans have now completely secured the Baltic states and pretty much have the entirety of the original Soviet original border territories taken Minsk, Belarusia, Eastern Ukraine, Kiev, northern Crimea, and pretty safe bet that Germany could take either Western Russia or Smolensk at ease at this point. The Soviets, they completed their mass conscription, so the Soviets can produce regular infantry at a cost of 2, but at a slightly reduced attack and defense rate, but it allows the Soviets to just crap out infantry, which they could sorely use. Soviets building up their forces in Transcaucasia to move into Tehran. So the United States can start building that naval base and start lend-leasing supplies through Iran, which will give the Soviets a +4 IPC bonus. The Germans started building the Fear Tiger tanks. They cost 2 payments of 4, so 8 total, and take 2 turns to build. As soon as those Tigers go online, get put on the map, that will unlock 2 technologies. One for the Soviets, one for the U.S. The Soviets will then start be able to researching the T-34-85 upgrade to their medium tank as a counter to the Tiger, and the Americans will be able to research and then put out the Firefly variant of the Sherman, and they'll just give, once upgraded, it'll give the Soviet and American medium tanks a +1 attack and defense to try to counter the Tiger tanks. The British moved in to Iraq and took it. Iraq was a Axis-aligned pro-German nation. The Brits moved in and took it. So the Allies are starting to slowly chip away at the Axis periphery, chip away at the perimeter, set themselves up for an actual invasion somewhere. Like I said, it's looking increasingly like that invasion is going to be Italy. Over in the Pacific, Japanese continuing to take Money Islands. Now the only Allied island left is this Java. Yeah, is Java, but the Japanese are gathering forces to take that. The Japanese suffered a major naval defeat northwest of Midway, had to pull their navy back to the home islands to refit and repair. Gave the U.S. kind of the run of the Pacific for the moment, and the Americans took that opportunity to invade and take the Marshalls. And probably the United States is going to use that to springboard further attack. Probably, so I had to guess, probably make a play for the Marianas. That's a victory point for Japan, so that'd take away a victory point from the Japanese. Also, that would put American bombers in range of the home islands. So if the United States could take the Marianas, get some strategic bombers there, they can start going after Japanese factories. Probably leave a good chunk of the retaking of the Money Islands to the Anzacs, probably. Americans put down another fleet carrier and a super battleship, first Iowa class. And that's about it. So, actually, the Manchukuo forces attacked the CCP, Communist China forces, and almost took it. It was pretty close, so it might cause the CCP to withdraw of Sichuan, because CCP has to hold this territory. If they lose it, they lose all their production and they're sunk. So CCP has to hold this territory at all costs. And then the British just continuing to build up Burma. If they lose Burma, then KMT China loses the Burma Road, and that'd be bad news for China. So that's about it. There's something big's on the horizon. There's definitely a shift in the fortunes of war and the balance of power. So next couple turns are going to be interesting, because the Allies are showing that they're about to make several major invasions, amphibious invasions. So we might see a return to mainland Europe by the Allies in the next turn or two. So stay tuned, and we'll see you then. Alright, we're at the spring of 1944. So the last turn recap, it was definitely the turn where the Allies and Warsaw definitely made their comeback. We'll start with the Atlantic. As you can see, there is only one German submarine in the Atlantic, so the Allies are definitely turned the tide and winning the Battle of the Atlantic. And then the Allied bombing campaign has done pretty significant damage to German factories and infrastructure. But more importantly, go to the blow-up. As you can see, Rome has fallen. Combined British and American attacked Rome, took it. So Italy is out of the game. The Germans then automatically annexed Turin and that major factory. But that is a major blow for the Axis powers. And as you can see, over in England, another landing, another invasion is coming sooner rather than later. That's that significant buildup. And then on top of that, the American fleet and troops that were sitting here off of DC have moved to the mouth of the Mediterranean, to Straits of Gibraltar. So all of that is sitting right here. So another Allied landing is going to be happening very, very soon. Let's see. And then the Eastern Theater, the Germans took Kursk, so they advanced to the gates of Moscow. And they also took Donetsk here, but then the Soviets were able to, with a combination of their built up T-34s and their conscripts, were able to retake Kursk and Donetsk, and they also took northern Iran, allowing the United States to start construction of that naval base, which once completed will give the Soviets a +4 IPC bonus. And because the Soviets retook Kursk and Donetsk, it allowed them to put out some desperately needed guards units. Importantly, the Soviets have also completed their T-34-85 technology, so the Soviets will be able to upgrade their T-34 tanks to the T-34-85 variant. It's an upgun T-34 to help the Soviets better counter specifically German Tiger tanks, but just German armor in general. The United States has also completed its upgrade technology for its medium tanks, the Firefly variant of the Sherman. Have completed that, so they'll be able to better contain with German armor. The British, they completed their advanced tactical bombers. Well, they did that last turn, but they put out their Typhoon tactical bombers. So that's it for the European theater. The Pacific theater, we had a series of naval battles.
Let's see if I can remember. It was a couple days ago that we did it, so I'm trying to remember. The Japanese fleet that was right here, and then the second Japanese fleet here attacked the American fleet here, and the Japanese definitely won that. The Americans lost a fleet carrier, a destroyer, they lost a fleet carrier and a destroyer, and in return Japan only lost a fighter and an escort carrier. But then the Anzacs took their fleet up, and because all that was left of this fleet was 2 destroyers, the Anzacs took their fleet up, finished off the rest of this fleet, and then the United States, with its fleet here and the remnants of its fleet here, attacked and completely wiped out the Japanese fleet here. So that was a fleet carrier, a cruiser, and 5 destroyers, and its accompanying aircraft. And it was a complete slaughter. The only thing the Americans didn't lose anything for wiping out that Japanese fleet. They got damaged battleship, damaged super battleship, and a damaged fleet carrier. The United States moved the fleet carrier back to Hawaii for repairs, and then the Marines landed on the Marianas and took it. So that is very bad news for Japan, because that means American bombers are now in range of Japanese home islands. And as you can see, America's prepared for that. They put down two strategic bombers in anticipation of taking the Marianas. So they'll be able to fly down to the Marianas this turn, and next turn they'll be able to start bombing Japan. But also, because the United States took the Marianas, that opens up Japan to start using kamikaze. So we'll see how that plays out. The Anzacs also tried to take the East Timor from the Japanese. They failed. They were pushed off the beach. And then the British attacked Siam, tried to push the Japanese out of Siam. That attack was a failure and forced the British to retreat. The Germans lost their first SS division, fortunately or unfortunately, depending on which side of the fence you're on. Once Germany loses an SS division, they do not get it back. So that was a little rough for the Germans. Another technology that the United States completed, they completed their Amtrak technology. So what that Amtraks were tracked amphibious vehicles that allowed them to drive right up on the beach and keep on going. It was a huge asset for the Marines. So how that will be represented in our board game is the United States now has the ability. In normal amphibious landing, the first wave can only be infantry. Well, now that the United States has the Amtrak ability, the United States can now land light tanks during the first wave, along with the infantry. That's it. We'll look at the production tracker. You see, the United States has two cruisers and a fleet carrier in the works, where the Japanese have a fleet carrier and a Yamato class super battleship.
And there's that naval facility that the United States is starting construction in Iran to open up that new Lend-Lease route. But more importantly, the United States has begun working on the Manhattan Project. Once the United States has completed these 3 facilities, a uranium mine, a nuclear reactor, and a heavy water plant, the United States will have access to nuclear weapons. And then the United States is still researching it, but if the United States can combine that with its B-29 heavy strategic bomber, that could be devastating for anyone who faces the United States' wrath. So we'll get cracking on the spring of 1944 turn and see where the Allies are going to land, because the United States moved that fleet out to the other side of the Atlantic. That's fairly certain that the next Allied landing is going to be happening this turn, probably. So we'll see if that is true and where it lands. See you then. Alright, we're at the fall of 1944. And, let me switch hands here. Allies continuing their bombing campaign, but they've actually expanded it. They've bombed the now German-held factory in northern Italy. The Allies have effectively won the Battle of the Atlantic. You see there's just one German sub in the Atlantic, and that's probably not going to be there for much longer. And as a result, you see the Allies have scaled back their anti-submarine assets considerably, banking on the fact that Germany probably isn't going to be producing too many more subs, if any at all. And the reason for that assumption is D-Day has happened. The Normandy landings have happened. The British and the Free French landed in Normandy, the Americans landing in Marseille, and were able to take both of them. And also with the Allies solidly in Italy, the Allies are here to stay. Germany does not have the strength to push them off the continent. If Germany wasn't facing the endless hordes of Soviet Russia, that'd probably be a different story, but with Germany having to dedicate, 70-80% of its total strength just to keep the Russians at bay, Germany just does not have enough to spare to hold off the Americans and the British, especially with its only other ally, Italy, gone. So that's big news for the turn. The Allies have returned to continental Europe. Bad news for the Axis powers. Germany made its first V-2 rocket attack on England, also known as the Vengeance weapons. That's actually what the V in V-2 stands for. Fortunately, only did 1 point of damage to the London factory. Unfortunately. Maybe this turn they'll do better. The Eastern Front, the Germans retook Donetsk, and then the Soviets counterattacked to try to retake it. That attack failed. The Soviets were forced to retreat. But the Soviets did attack and successfully take Smolensk back. So Smolensk has been liberated. The upgunned T-34-85s have been proven their worth. That's about it for European theater. Pacific theater was quiet. scratch it. It was not. It was quieter, I should say. American submarine managed to do maximum damage on this Japanese convoy line, but that was pretty much the only attack the Americans made. They repaired their fleet carrier, moved it to the Marianas, flew those strategic bombers to the Marianas to start bombing Japanese home island factories. They pulled their damaged battleships back to send them to Hawaii for repairs. But the United States is making the Marianas its focal point for forces. Moved every available asset it had to the Marianas to make sure the Japanese could not counterattack and retake it. Because the United States needs the Marianas to put Japan in range of bomber. But also the Marianas serves as kind of the gateway for Indonesia, the Money Islands, because while that American force is sitting there, Japan cannot reinforce Indonesia and the Money Islands, leaving them open for invasion by either Anzac or United States, probably a combination of both. The United States put out its Amtraks. Those are light tanks that can be landed in the first wave of an amphibious landing. So that would be key to taking some of these islands back. The British did attack Siam, and they were successful. That was really the only real attack that happened in the Pacific. Like I said, the Pacific was fairly quiet this turn. Germany completed its Me-262 technology, so Germany has unlocked jet aircraft, so that will be a big help, although it might be too little too late. And the United States had a big turn for technology. It completed all of its technology but one. So now the United States has naval radar, long-range aircraft, advanced fighters, you name it, they got it now. But the only technology they haven't completed is advanced submarine warfare. But at this point, that's kind of not really a factor anymore. So I don't know whether or not the United States will continue progressing that research or not. But Japan put out a fleet carrier, manned it, and then also garrisoned Iwo Jima and Okinawa. Well, they already had militia there, but they put actual infantry there. Start building up some of those defenses in case the United States makes a play for those islands instead of going south to Indonesia. Japan still has their Yamato super battleship under construction. The United States has a cruiser and a fleet carrier. That naval base for Iran is almost complete. That'll give the Soviets a +4 IPC bonus. And the United States is continuing its research in the Manhattan Project. So it is 2 turns away, assuming the United States continues, which I don't know why they wouldn't. The United States is 2 turns away from having nuclear weapons. So we will. The United States also took all of its transports that it had in the Mediterranean from the Italian invasion and then the French invasion. Started sending them west. They don't really have a use for them in Europe anymore. There's only 3 turns left in the war, so the United States doesn't have enough time to send them all to go back to East Coast, pick something up, and get back. By the time they get back, it'll
whoops, it'll be over. So the United States is just probably going to send them to the Pacific. Don't know if they'll get there in time, but who knows? So on that, we'll do this fall 1944 turn and see what happens. It is the fall of 1944, and the Axis powers are decidedly on the defensive. Pretty much the Allies and the Warsaw powers have basically managed to get it to a stage where the Axis powers are incapable of any offensive action at all. So the deciding factor, because there's 2 turns left, so the deciding factor is can the Axis powers hold on to enough territory to win in the end, and conversely, can the Allies take enough, or should I say liberate enough territory and take away victory points from the Axis in order for them to win. So we shall see in 2 turns. I actually have no idea who actually is winning at this point. I haven't counted the victory points. I generally don't do that to the very end. So I have no idea who is winning or not. But so what happened last turn? The Atlantic hasn't really changed much. The British failed to sink the German submarine. Americans continuing to move their transport fleet over to the Pacific. The Americans are 1 turn away from having nukes, so next turn the United States will have nuclear weapons. You notice there is no free French roundels on the board anymore. That is because the British have liberated Paris. Well, with some help from the Americans. It was a joint British-American operation. They've liberated Paris and reconstituted the French government, so France is back. And as you can see, Picardia is the only occupied French territory left. The Allies more or less liberated France. No action in the Italian front. Main reason for that is, if you guys recall, that all of our scenarios are interconnected. So how one ends can affect how the next begins. And there is another scenario after this in a whole new map. It's the Cold War. And so stuff that happens here will carry over, so my Axis partner doesn't necessarily know this, but I'm holding back on taking northern Italy because northern Italy is Italy's factory. It's a major factory, so if I take that will reduce it down to a minor factory, which means Italy will have a minor factory going into the Cold War. And it seems how Italy, if assuming I win this, Italy becomes a NATO member, that means I'd have to spend time and money and resources upgrading that back up to a major factory. So that is why I am holding off. I mean, I could take northern Italy pretty easily, but that's why I'm holding off, because I don't want to reduce that factory down to a minor and then have to spend money and resources upgrading it back up to a major factory in the Cold War. My Axis counterpart doesn't know that, but that is why. Doesn't mean I'm not bombing this factory and forcing him to repair it. Speaking of bombing, the German vengeance weapons out in the Netherlands hit the London factory. did 4 points of damage on that. And then the British bombed Berlin, and there's the first dogfight between German jet fighters, the Me-262, and the British Spitfire. Fortunately, both missed. Unfortunately, the German anti-aircraft did hit the British bomber, but that's fine. England can afford that all day long. Americans bombed West Germany. And on the Eastern Front, there was 2 assaults. Soviets attacked Minsk, but were unable to take it, had to withdraw. And then, what is this? Donetsk. Soviets attacked Donetsk again and retook it. And that was a pretty big victory for the Soviets, because this here was the primary concentration of German strength in the east. So now that that's gone, has drastically reduced the just number of German units on the east. So probably looking like the Soviets this turn, or at the very least definitely next turn, Soviets will be able to do a general offensive across the whole front, and see how that goes. Let's see. That naval base has been completed in Iran, opening up that southern Lend-Lease route, which has given the Soviets a +4 IPC bonus. The Pacific saw a lot of action this turn. The Anzac has taken or liberated East Timor, and then British liberated Malay, and KMT China went on a big offensive and liberated Guangxi. So that's pretty big. And then he had a big naval fight off the coast of Japan. There used to be a fleet carrier, a cruiser, and a couple more destroyers, but the United States attacked the Japanese fleet here. And it was a bloodbath. Both sides got clobbered. Japanese lost their fleet carrier, a cruiser, destroyer, and a tactical bomber, and then their super battleship, the Yamato, was hit twice and reduced down to 1 health. The Americans, they lost their fleet carrier, an escort carrier, and 2 destroyers. But, so in terms of tonnage, Americans lost more, but strategically that's more of a victory for the U.S. because there's only 2 turns left, so that means that Japan cannot produce any more carriers. Doesn't have the time. It takes 4 turns to produce a carrier. There's only 2 turns left. So Japan has no carrier. Japan basically has no carriers, whereas the United States just put down another fleet carrier, fully loaded, and with the advanced fighters. So that means American fighters will be having a +2 against Japan. And granted, this fleet probably won't get there in time, but America has a whole nother fleet with fleet carrier, battleship, cruiser, and 2 destroyers coming to reinforce. So the United States basically has the run of the Pacific right now. There is pretty much nothing Japan can do to stop American naval operations in the Pacific. So, but like once again, there's only 2 turns left in this thing, so don't know how much the United States is going to be able to accomplish in those 2 turns, but we shall see. So we will do the fall of 1944 and come back. Alright, I'll start with a correction. Earlier I said it was the fall of 1944. That was incorrect. It was the spring of 1945. So I apologize for that. This is the fall of 1945 turn, and consequently the last turn of the war. So starting with the Atlantic, the British have failed yet again to sink this damn submarine. And then the German vengeance weapon hit the London factory for 5 damage. But then, as you can see, the British and the Americans have hit the Berlin, the Munich, and the Northern Italian factory pretty hard with the bombing campaigns. As you can see, France has been completely liberated. Here's a blow-up view of that. France has been completely liberated. Germany now has 2 jet fighters in Berlin and Munich, even though they have yet to shoot anything down. Big news is in the Eastern Front, where the Soviets went on a general offensive across the whole front, and the northern sector have blown a hole, a pretty big hole in the German line. As you can see, this is it in the way for Germany, in the way of those Soviets. Soviets won everywhere. They took Minsk, Belarusia, and Donetsk. So it's probably a good thing that this is the last turn, because Germany is toast. They got close though. They got to the gates of Moscow before they were finally stopped, as the Soviets getting the conscript infantry right when they did was Soviet saving grace, and Allies opening up a second front. Over in the Pacific, the British liberated Saigon, and the Anzacs came over and liberated Sumatra. Americans sunk this Japanese submarine that was right here. American submarine here did... I don't think they did any damage. Or no, they did 3 damage. Americans bombed Tokyo again. The British tried to take Hanoi, but were repulsed. Those mountain territories are tough nuts to crack. KMT
came down and liberated Hong Kong for the British. Something I didn't explain, these red planes here, these are kamikazes that the Japanese can implement if the United States enters certain sea zones. But we're fixing to have a very big naval fight, probably the biggest naval battle of the game. The Japanese moved their fleet out to the southeast of Okinawa, because that is an American victory point, so likelihood of America trying to go for it is pretty high. This pretty much is what is left, the entirety of what's left of the Japanese fleet. See all those Japanese transports that were here have been sunk. And this Japanese fleet is going to have to go up against all of that. It is not looking good for Japan. Especially because right here is the B-29 Super Fortress, the heavy strategic bomber. And right here is a nuclear bomb, my friend. The United States has nuclear weaponry, and it has the means to use it. It has to have a B-29 heavy strategic bomber, and it has it. And it's in the Marianas, which definitely puts it in range of Japan. So there's a pretty good chance that Japan's going to get nuked this turn. Like I said, I still have no idea who's winning or who will win. I purposely don't count the victory points until the very end of the game. I'm guessing it's probably going to be an Allied victory, but who knows? So we'll do this last turn and see who won. Oh, one other thing I've forgotten to mention is the Russians have been the Soviets have been building up forces on the Manchurian border up here. So I wonder what that's about. It being the last turn, we're about to find out. So see you then. Alright, we have completed the fall of 1945 turn, and that is the end of the game. Keep in mind, this was the very first playtest of our World War II game ever. Prior to this, it was just theory on a paper. Well, multiple papers. But anyways. So this is not the final version of this game by any means. There will probably be some revisions, particularly how we do our carrier strike craft mechanic in regards to amphibious invasions. But going by the victory points and objectives we have right now, as an Allied victory, Allies scored 14 points. Comintern or Warsaw Pact scored 2, and the Axis scored 6. Like I said, that's subject to change, but it was a pretty intense last turn. That is just the Axis carnage for the last turn. The Allies lost about as much, about maybe 3/4 of that. And as you can see, there's a little bit fewer German roundels on the board. This is what the Western Theater looks like. France completely liberated. British liberated Belgium. And over here on the Eastern Front, you see the Russians, the Soviets pretty much just broke through everywhere. So I don't know if that means we have to beef Germany up a little bit more going forward, or if I just played that good of a allied player. Who knows? Need more play tests to know that for certain. The Pacific, this is that American fleet that was over in Europe. It brought it over to assist in taking some of the Indonesian islands. America landed in Borneo, using those Amtraks, so America can use light tanks in the first wave of amphibious landings. That's the Pacific Air Force on the Marianas. And this was the last naval battle of the war. The United States soundly defeated the Japanese Navy, but could not take Okinawa. The Japanese were able to repel that. British took Hanoi, so liberated all of French Indochina. The Soviets moved in and took northern Manchuria. The United States did go ahead and nuke Japan, so that territory is just kind of gone. But yeah, we had a lot of fun. Like I said, this is the first playtest ever, so revisions to follow. But for now, I think we'll move on to our Cold War. We've playtested our Cold War a couple times, but not on the new map, and definitely have not aired it on YouTube. So that'll be something for you guys to look forward to. If you stuck with us to the end of our World War II, thanks for watching and sticking with, and we will see you for the Cold War.